Thanks for joining us today for our online Bible study here from Pine Valley Church of Christ. And we have, for the past several months, because of the pandemic, been doing these online, and we've gone through the book of Romans together, as well as the book of Ezekiel. And for these next three lessons, since we are in the holiday season around Christmas, I thought we would take these next three lessons to talk about God's fulfillment of his plan in the life and ministry of Jesus Christ and his death, burial, and resurrection, and how all things fit around that and their meaning for us in our lives as followers of Jesus. And so today I wanted to begin with the beginning of the promise comes to us in Genesis chapter 12 as he begins to build his covenant relationship with Abraham through the promises that he makes to him at that time. Just as some brief historical background, most believe Abraham lived around 1900 BC, when end of chapter 12, he goes to Egypt with his wife Sarai. And by that time, the Great Pyramids of Giza have already been built and been in existence for almost 600 years. So since the time of Noah, we don't know exactly how much time has passed by, but enough time has passed by for civilization to spread through, not only throughout the world, but to develop quite intricate systems of thought and religion and arithmetic, science, and build such beautiful structures as the pyramids. And it's into this setting that Abraham is brought out of his native country into the land of Canaan and begins to interact with the Lord God throughout the rest of his life. We don't know exactly what kind of relationship they had before this time, but it seems obvious that when God comes to him at the age of 75 and begins to communicate with him, that Abraham is familiar with the Lord and is quite willing to follow him, though it is a journey of faith. And that is why Paul and others refer to Abraham as the father of faith. And so let me pull up our screen share, and we'll get into our class together with that as our background. And one of the things we're all aware of is the promises that are so easily broken in the world in which we live, whether it is family members, whether it's people in power like politicians. And probably all of us have dealt with people on an individual basis that, they're constantly making promises about the things that they're going to do or the things that they're never going to do again. And yet are people who just continuously break their promises. Others don't do it all the time, but they do it when it's convenient to them. Other promises are made that we really have no control over and can be broken simply because we do not have the power to keep that promise. When my father died, our youngest son was just 3 or 4 years old. And when we came home from the funeral, he was very upset. So I was putting him to bed one night and crying about he didn't want to die. He didn't want me or Pam to die. And we had to talk, and I promised him that night that I was not going to die for a long time. Now, I really had no power to fulfill that promise. I could have had a heart attack. I could have been in a bad wreck. There are a lot of things that I could not control in the keeping of that promise. And people do those kinds of things all the time. But we are blessed that, like Abraham, we believe in and serve a God who keeps his promises. We think about just a few chapters before in Genesis chapter 8, his promise to Abraham, or in chapter 9, that he would never destroy the world again by water. And the sign to him and to Abraham, or to Noah, was the rainbow. And we are reminded every time now that it rains, and we see the rainbow, we are reminded of God's promise. And he has kept that promise now for thousands of years. And so we can put a hope in a God that we know not only makes promises and keeps his promises, but he has the power to do so. And that's really what we see here, that he demonstrates to Abraham in his life. And so as we come here to Genesis chapter 12, here are the first 4 verses of that chapter. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to a land that I will show you." And that's the only thing that is asked of Abraham at this time, or Abram, that he go. Leave your people, your father's household, to the land that I will show you. Everything else is now a promise of what God is going to do for him if he does this. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him. It's a great set of promises made by the Lord as he speaks to Abram. And Abram does exactly what God asked him to do. He says, "Go." And so Abram went. And if we kind of break it down, we see there's several promises within this section, that he will make you a great nation. He will bless you. You'll make your name great. You will be a blessing because of what God is going to do and how he's going to bless you. You can then turn around and bless others in the way that you live. God will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Some break those into 2 separate promises, but to me, in terms of the context, they are linked together and are one, and that all nations will be blessed through you. And even within the next couple of chapters, we begin to see these things come into being. Abram goes at the end of chapter 12 to Egypt because of a famine in the land of Canaan, which is going to play a role later on in the book of Genesis as well. And so they go to Egypt where they know there is food. But Abram is very aware that his wife is considered to be a beautiful woman. He is afraid that the Egyptians will kill him because of her. And we immediately see the struggle of his faith. Yes, he has gone, but he has no children at this point, no descendants whatsoever. And he feels the need to lie about his wife and says that she is his sister, though we find out later she is his half-sister. But still, in essence, what he says is a lie, and it puts the entire promise at danger because Pharaoh takes her into his own house. And if he had sexual relations with her and had children through her, or any of those type of things, it would have caused a great deal of problems. It also showed that he didn't truly believe at this time that God would save his life and keep him from being killed, so that he would keep his promises. And yet while he's there, Pharaoh is made aware through curses on his household that Sarai is Abram's wife. He goes to Abram and basically kicks him out of the country. But during the meantime, because he is considered to be Sarai's brother, he is given great wealth. He's given sheep and cows and other types of possessions. and he is able to take all of those things with him. And even though he has not been truly faithful to what God is wanting him to do, God is carrying out his promise to protect him, to watch over him, so that he can fulfill all of these others. And he ends up being greatly blessed financially. So much so that when Abram is in the next chapter, he and his nephew Lot go back to the land of Canaan. Their flocks grow to the point where they need to separate. And so Lot chooses to go down toward Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham stays in the land of Canaan, and God comes to him again and reminds him again that he will give him this land, that he can walk the length and breadth of it and know that God will fulfill this promise. In chapter 14, Abram truly is a blessing to those around him, and his name truly starts to become great, because when raiding kings from the north come through the land, they fight against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. They defeat them. They start carrying loot and hostages off with them, and this includes Lot and his family. And Abraham gathers all of his servants together. They go off after them. They defeat the invading kings, and they rescue the people. And on his way back, they stop off at the ancient city of Salem, which would later become Jerusalem. And he meets Melchizedek, who is high priest of the God Most High. And they come to an understanding that they both worship the same God, and Abraham gives him a tenth of all that he has gotten in returning the loot from these invading kings. And others want to give him even more, and he says, no, I will not let you say that you made me rich, but he is beginning to depend more and more on God. And all of these things continue to sort of weave through the entire story. But the big problem that continues on for a number of years is that there is still no children. And when God comes to him in chapter 15 to confirm the covenant and make it with him again, Abraham says in verse 2, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus, which was the custom of the time. If you died childless, then the head servant was the one who would inherit. And this continues on, and it's the struggle that they have. They even try to help God out. A number of years later, when Sarai gives Abram her maidservant Hagar and says, have a child with her. And he does, and this is Ishmael. And at this time, Abraham is 86 years old. But God comes to him and says, no, this is not going to be the child through whom this promise will be carried out. In chapter 17, he comes to Abram again when he's 99 now. And again, reminds him of the promise, confirms it through the covenant of circumcision, and that this is something that every male child would keep from then on. And God reaffirms the promise and tells him specifically in verse 15 and following, as for Sarai, your wife, you will no longer call her Sarai, but she will be Sarah, which means princess. And I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations, and kings and peoples will come from her. And Abraham falls face down and laughs and says, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And again, throws out the idea of Ishmael being the heir and might live under God's blessing. And God says, no, this will be carried out through Sarah. And you can understand Abraham's struggle with this because he's 100 or he's 99 at this point. By the time they had a child, he would be 100. Sarai would be 90. And in chapter 18, when the three angels are on their way to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and they stop by to visit with Abraham and Sarah, and they again, just a short time after the previous chapter, emphasize to Abraham that this time next year, Sarah will bear you a child. But we are told very specifically in verse 11 that Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. And that's how most English translations put it, though some do put a footnote as to the indication. The Hebrew is much more specific and basically describes that she has gone through menopause and is no longer menstruating. In other words, she is biologically incapable of bearing children anymore. And I think God does this on purpose. He wants it understood that this didn't happen at just the hands or the will of Abraham and Sarah, but it could only happen by his power as he was fulfilling his promise, and that he had the power to do so because he was in control of the situation. And so, even though they try to help him out, God keeps saying, no, I am going to do this, and you will know that I have fulfilled my promise. A promise that is fulfilled finally 25 years after it was originally made. When Isaac is born in chapter 21, he is 100 years old. Sarah is 90. 25 years have passed since the original promise. And we see this great, amazing journey of faith through these years. And we all know how when situations can last a long time, the time and stress and struggle and situations that we deal with in this world can really wear on our faith. And Abraham has had his struggles. Just imagine we're only 10 months into the pandemic and people are already complaining about having COVID fatigue and not wanting to wear masks anymore. And yet we know it's going to go on for at least another half year to a year as the vaccine is rolled out before life may turn to some kind of normalcy. And so we have to hang on and continue to put our faith in God and do what he wants us to do, which is to be mindful of those around us. But think about that lasting 25 years rather than just a year and a half to 2 years. And this is the journey of Abraham through his life. But during all of these times in which God comes to him and speaks to him, in chapter 15, God takes him out and shows him the stars in the heavens and tells him that, yes, you will become the father of many nations and your descendants will be like the stars. And we are simply told Abraham believed. Just like we're told back in chapter 12, just Abraham went. They're very simple and yet powerful descriptions of Abraham's faith as it grows and develops in his life. And laughter once again comes into their life. While Abram and Sarai had laughed when they heard the messages about Sarah having a child in her old age, it now has a whole new meaning. Of course, when God is talking to him in chapter 18 or 17, he tells him, oh, we're going to have a name change. Your name is no longer Abram, which means father, but Abraham, which father of many. Sarai is going to be Sarah, who is now princess, because she is going to be such a central figure in this whole thing. And though it's been very hard for him to believe through this, God gave him a very specific promise and time after 24 years. This time next year, you will have the child, and I will do this. It is at his power. And when the child is born, they name him Isaac, which means laughter. And we're told at that time that Sarah has the child, and she says, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Who would have believed that Abraham and Sarah would nurse children, that yet I have borne him a son in his old age? Now, this is the powerful, fulfilling promise of God by his power, not anything that was a part of what Abraham or Sarah could do on their own. And yet, when we come to chapter 22, we've entered one of those really difficult stories when we wonder just exactly what God is doing, because it is here sometime later. We don't know how old Isaac is. We simply know he is old enough to go on this long journey. We know he is old enough to be aware that as they go up the mountain together, that they do not have a sacrificial lamb with them. But God comes to him and says, I want you to take your promised son. We see the phrase, one and only son. And we know Isaac was not his only son. He had Ishmael. But this was the one that was uniquely his son, because it had been promised by God and brought about by God's power. I want you to take that son that I promised to give you on this journey to a mountain I will show you, and offer him as a burnt sacrifice. We can only imagine what's going through Abraham's mind at this time, but he goes. Again, one of those very short, powerful descriptions. And just like he left his family and went to the land of Canaan, here he went on the journey and takes Isaac with him up to the mountain. And when Isaac asked him about the sacrifice, the sacrificial lamb, Abraham simply states, God will provide. He is truly gotten to a point in his life where he believes God will somehow bring about a continued fulfillment of his promise. And I think this is what the writer of Hebrews is referring to in Hebrews 11:17, when he says, by faith, Abraham offered his son as a sacrifice because he believed that if he sacrificed him, God could raise him from the dead. He's moved from the point back in chapter 12 of thinking that he has to lie to protect his life and his wife's life, possibly, and puts the promise in jeopardy, to now believing that this promised child would somehow, if he just does what God wants him to do, as God continually told him, his part of the covenant was to do whatever God told him to live in obedience by faith. And so when he has bound Isaac, we don't know if Isaac puts up any kind of struggle. We're not giving any of those kind of details. We just know that he is bound and placed on the altar. Abraham has the knife in his hand about to slay him when an angel says, don't do it. He is saved from this situation. They see that there is a ram caught in the bushes nearby, which they do offer as a sacrifice to God. And you can only imagine the impact that this would have on the rest of Isaac's life. But this is the journey that Abraham has taken to putting a complete hope and trust in God, who has made this promise, and that even if he makes his child a sacrifice, he will still keep his promise because he is able to do so. And that's such a powerful thing for us to lean on in our own journeys of faith. knowing God is going to keep his promise. And he tells Abraham that he knows now. I know, because you have not withheld your son, your promised son. I know how much you believe in me, and I will, of course, keep my part of the covenant. I will keep all of my promises. The major one being down the road, that through his descendants, all nations would be blessed, either through the presence of God's people as Israel among them, but more specifically through the life of his son, who will come into the world, a descendant of Abraham. So from this particular lesson, we take with us some lessons of knowing that God always keeps his promises, but he does it in his own way and in his own time. We like to pray for things and want God to answer. We want him to do things quickly. We are used to having a world in which we can have things done almost instantly for us. But God has his plan, and he is going to do it in his way and in his own time. And it is up to us to remain faithful, however long it takes, and to put our faith in God that the things that happen are part of his plan and his purpose. And it's not about what we think he should do, but we put our faith in him. And we do that by responding in obedience. This is the outgrowth of our faith. And he tells us to put our faith in his son, Jesus Christ, to repent of our selfish ways and deny self and give our lives to him as Abraham did. And then just walk that journey of faith. Whether we understand it or not, we just continue to believe that it is God will keep his promises. And now, as followers of Jesus, we know he has promised us that he is coming back and that we will one day live with God in heaven forever. It's been 2,000 years since he made that promise. But we continue to believe. We must continue to hang on as Abraham did. But while we're here, we, like Abraham, are to be a blessing to those who are around us. As a result of the blessings God has given us, because of our faith and our obedience and his salvation through his son Jesus, we are to be a blessing, whether it's through our work at the Good Shepherd or the Ashley Center, passing out the blessing bags to the homeless on the streets. Whatever we can do, people we work with, people we go to school with, we're to be a blessing to those people. Even if that's simple as I wear a face mask, because it's not about how comfortable it is to me or my own personal rights, but it is about loving my neighbor and seeking to do what's best for them and be a blessing to them. And it is still God's desire to bless all nations. And that's part of a purpose and a mission that we are to be a part of on a regular basis. As we bless others, we take the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ to a lost and hurting world and share with them the wonderful promises of God, which we know will come true because he has the power to do so. And we take that message into all the world, whether it's here in Wilmington, New Hanover County, whether it is through the teaching of the orphan children in Sanati, Zambia, support of other mission work. We do what we can to help share the good news, the promises of God with the lost of all the world. Because he knew about Abraham's faith, because he was willing to give his son. But God did not withhold his son from the world. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, the one uniquely his son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. What a great blessing and a fulfillment of God's promise that he did not withhold his son from being a sacrifice for us. And so we put our hope and our trust in him, and knowing that all of his promises for the future and for our lives will come true. And so next week, we're going to move on from looking at the promise as it was made to Abraham, but then to the presence of God himself coming into the world, God in the flesh, and the power and the presence of God in this world, and what it means to our lives each and every day. We thank you for joining us in this presentation and look forward to our time next week. I encourage you to be reading from those early chapters in Matthew and Luke that not only describe the birth of Jesus, but that first chapter of the Gospel of John, where he truly expresses this coming of God in the flesh. The Word became flesh, and what that means to us in our lives and how it should affect us each and every day. Thank you for being with us. I look forward to you being with us again.